In a world of cold, polished surfaces, the fire of rebellion is the only thing that can break the mirror of deception. Join us as we tell the stories of those who dared to defy the system and rewrite their own future. Hit subscribe now and join the cinematic revolution today.
The note was already in my hand before I realized what it said. I'd been sitting in the waiting area of St. Mercy General for almost 2 hours at that point, right outside the cardiac unit on the 4th floor. My mother had gone in for a routine procedure that morning. A stent placement. Her cardiologist had called it low risk, in and out by noon. And now it was nearly 3 in the afternoon, and nobody had come out to tell me anything. I'd asked the front desk twice. The second time, the woman behind the glass gave me a smile so practiced it didn't reach her eyes and said, "Someone will be right with you." I'd stopped believing that around the 2-hour mark. The waiting room was the kind of place that makes you feel worse just by being in it. Beige walls, chairs bolted to the floor in rows, a television mounted too high on the wall playing a cable news channel with the volume low enough that you could hear the tone but not the words. There were maybe 8 other people spread around the room. A young couple holding hands near the window. An older man in a baseball cap who kept checking his flip phone. A woman across from me who'd been knitting the same section of something blue for as long as I'd been there. I wasn't paying attention to any of them, not really. I was staring at my own hands in my lap, running through every worst-case scenario my brain could construct when I felt something brush against my fingers. I looked down. A folded piece of paper. Small, torn from something larger, the edges uneven. I looked up. The knitting woman was already looking back at her work, needles moving again like nothing had happened. I glanced around. No one else was watching me. I unfolded it. 4 words written in pencil, in handwriting that pressed hard into the paper like the person writing it had been urgent or afraid. "Don't go to room 422. I read it twice, then a third time. My mother was in room 422. I knew this because when they'd wheeled her back, the nurse, a young man with a lanyard covered in small enamel pins, had told me specifically, "She'll be recovering in 422. We'll come find you when she's ready for visitors." I looked up again at the woman across from me. She was still knitting, her eyes were fixed on her work. But her jaw was tight. I could see the muscle there, working. My first thought was that it was a mistake, that the note was meant for someone else, that this woman had confused me with another person in the room, or that maybe this was nothing. Maybe this was some kind of prank, or I was misreading a completely ordinary situation because I was exhausted and anxious and had been drinking terrible waiting room coffee since 11 o'clock in the morning. But the handwriting. The way those 4 words were pressed into that paper, that wasn't the handwriting of someone playing a prank. I folded the note back up and held it in my palm. I waited a moment, then said, quietly, "Excuse me." The woman looked up. She was maybe 60, 65. Silver hair pulled back. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Ordinary in every way except for her eyes, which were watching me with an alertness that felt completely out of place in a cardiac waiting room. "Did you write this?" I kept my voice low. She glanced at the note in my hand, then back at my face. For a moment she didn't say anything. Then she gave one small nod. "Why?" I asked. She looked past me toward the hallway, toward the nurse's station, then back. "Not here," she said. Just that. 2 words, and then her eyes went back to her knitting. I sat there for a long moment, holding that note, trying to figure out if I was losing my mind. Because here's the thing. My mother had been moved to room 4112 at approximately 12:30. By 1 o'clock, I had been told she was stable and resting and that the procedure had gone as expected. I hadn't been allowed back yet because she was still being monitored. That was 2 hours ago. And now, a stranger in the waiting room was telling me, in writing, not to go there. I thought about getting up. I thought about walking straight to the nurse's station and handing them the note and asking someone to explain it to me. That's what you're supposed to do, right? That's the rational thing. But something stopped me. I don't know how to explain it except to say that the woman across from me was scared. Not panicked, not dramatic about it, but scared, in the way that people are scared when they've already seen something and they're trying to figure out what to do next. I've known that look. I've worn that look. I leaned forward slightly, Can you at least tell me why? She kept her eyes on her work. Her voice came out barely above a murmur. There was a man, she said. Earlier. Before you got here. He asked the desk which room a woman named. She paused. What's your mother's name? Helen, I said. She looked up. He said Helen? The floor felt like it shifted under me. He was there for maybe 5 minutes, she continued. The woman at the desk, she told him, room 422. I was sitting right there 2 chairs away. I heard the whole thing. He wrote it down. She paused. He wasn't family. I could tell. The way he asked. It wasn't worried. It wasn't scared. It was. She searched for the word. Deliberate. I was very still. I didn't know what to do, she said. I didn't want to make a scene if I was wrong. But when you came in and they told you room 422, I heard that too. I thought, she shook her head. I thought someone should know. I stood up before I realized I was doing it. My heart was going fast in a way that had nothing to do with the coffee. Let me tell you something about my mother. She is 71 years old. She worked as a bookkeeper for the same small accounting firm in Tucson for 34 years, then retired, then started volunteering at the library 3 days a week because she said she needed somewhere to put herself. She is not a dramatic person. She does not have enemies. She doesn't have a complicated past. No secrets that I know of. No reason that anyone would. Except there was one thing. 6 months ago, my mother had agreed to be a witness in a civil lawsuit. An old neighbor of hers, a woman named Florence, had been defrauded by a financial planner who'd convinced her to move her retirement savings into accounts that turned out to be essentially his personal fund. My mother had been present for 2 of the conversations between Florence and this man. She'd signed an affidavit. The case was still ongoing. I had not connected that to a hospital visit until this exact moment. I walked to the desk. The woman behind the glass looked up, different from before. This one was older, glasses, a cardigan with a small pin that said, Patient Services. My mother is Helen in room 422, I said, and I kept my voice steady even though my hands were not. I need to know if anyone besides me and her doctors has been asking about her today. The woman blinked. I'm sorry? A man. Did a man come to this desk today and ask about a patient named Helen? She hesitated. Something shifted behind her eyes. We don't typically share. Please, I said. I'm her daughter. I'm asking you directly. Did someone ask about her today who wasn't on her visitor list? She looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and said, Let me get the charge nurse. The charge nurse was a tall woman named Donna. I read her badge, and she came out from behind the double doors with the quick walk of someone who has learned to move fast without looking alarmed. She took me to a small room off the main corridor. It had 2 chairs and a box of tissues on a side table, the kind of room they use for bad news. Tell me what you know, she said. I told her everything. The note. The woman in the waiting room. What she'd heard. The lawsuit. Florence, the financial planner. Donna listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, a man did come to the desk this morning, around 11. He identified himself as your mother's nephew. She paused. He was told visiting hours and which room. My mother doesn't have a nephew, I said. The hallway outside went very quiet. Donna was already on her radio. What happened in the next 20 minutes moved very fast and also seemed to take forever, the way time does when something real is happening. A security officer came. Then a second one. They went to room 420. I was told to stay in the small room, which I did for approximately 4 minutes before I couldn't anymore, and I went and stood in the doorway of the corridor. My mother was fine. She was asleep. Monitor steady, everything exactly as it should have been. The man, they found him in the stairwell 1 floor up. I don't know all the details of what happened after that because there are parts of that day I've only been able to piece together from what people told me later. What I know is that he had a visitor badge he shouldn't have had, and he had my mother's room number written on a slip of paper in his pocket, and the police were called, and the civil lawsuit that I mentioned. That case became considerably more complicated in the weeks that followed. My mother doesn't know any of this happened. I made a decision not to tell her that day, and then the day turned into a week, and the week turned into a month, and by then she was recovered and doing her library shifts again, and I didn't want to put that fear into her. Maybe that was wrong of me. I go back and forth on it. But here's what I think about more than anything else. I think about a woman in a waiting room who didn't have to do anything. She didn't know me. She didn't know my mother. She was there for her own reasons, her own worry, her own person somewhere behind those double doors. She could have sat there and told herself it was probably nothing, that it wasn't her business, that she didn't want to get involved. Instead, she tore a corner off the notepad in her purse and wrote 4 words in pencil and pressed them into a stranger's hand. I went back to the waiting room after everything had calmed down, after the security officers had gone and the charge nurse had walked me back to my mother's room, and I had sat with my mother for a while as she slept. I went back because I wanted to find her, the woman with the knitting. She was gone. I asked the woman at the front desk if she'd seen where she went, described her, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain, a project in blue yarn. The woman behind the glass thought for a moment and then said, "Oh, she got called back about an hour ago. Her husband's surgery went well." I'm glad for that. I'm glad her husband's surgery went well. I never got her name. I never got to say thank you. I've thought about what I would say if I could, and I think it would be something simple. The way the important things usually are. You didn't know me. You didn't have to. You paid attention when it would have been so easy not to, and then you did something about it. Even when doing something felt uncertain and strange and maybe a little frightening. I've tried to be more like that since then. I can't say I always manage it, but I try. My mother is 71 years old and she volunteers at the library 3 days a week, and she has no idea how close that Tuesday came to being something else entirely. And I'm her daughter, and I know, and I carry it quietly, and some days I think about a folded piece of paper and 4 words pressed hard into it, and I think about how much can turn on something that small. Pay attention. That's all. Just pay attention. I still think about that torn piece of paper, 4 words in pencil, pressed so hard the letters almost went through to the other side. That's what urgency looks like when someone doesn't have time or safety to explain themselves out loud. What strikes me most, looking back, isn't the danger. It's the choice that woman made in that waiting room. She was there for her own husband, carrying her own fear, her own private weight of not knowing. She had every reason to keep her eyes on her knitting and her thoughts on the man behind those double doors. No one would have blamed her. No one would have even known, but she noticed something. And then she decided that noticing wasn't enough. That's the part I keep turning over, because I think most of us notice more than we act on. We see the thing that doesn't sit right, the question in someone's eyes, the detail that's slightly off, and we talk ourselves out of it. We say it's probably nothing. We say it's not our place. We say we don't want to be wrong and look foolish. I've done it. I know I have. And that woman in the cardigan could have done it too, and my mother's Tuesday would have looked very different. There's something I've come to believe about the people who actually change things in this world, and it's not that they're braver or smarter than the rest of us. It's that they've made a prior decision, sometimes without even knowing it, to trust what they see and then do something with it, not to outsource their judgment, not to wait for someone more qualified to step in. The woman with the knitting wasn't a security guard or a detective. She was a wife sitting in a hospital waiting room. She just paid attention and then acted on what she saw, even when acting was uncertain and awkward and possibly embarrassing. I think about what it takes to do that. It's not just courage, though it is that. It's a kind of moral clarity that says, this matters more than my comfort. This stranger's safety is worth my moment of feeling foolish. That clarity is something you build slowly, over years of small decisions about what kind of person you want to be. My mother built it over 71 years of showing up for people, and I think some version of it rubbed off on me, even when I'm not sure I deserve the credit. And then there's what happened after. The way a single note sent everything in motion. The charge nurse who listened, the security officers who moved fast. The lawsuit that got more complicated in ways I still don't fully understand. None of that happens if one woman stays quiet. Every piece of it depended on her choosing not to. I've tried to hold on to that. The idea that what you do when it's inconvenient, When you're tired and scared and worried about your own situation, that's what actually defines you. Not the grand gestures, the quiet ones. The note you pass to a stranger because something isn't right and you've decided that's enough of a reason. My mother volunteers at the library 3 days a week, and she has no idea how close that Tuesday came. I carry that knowledge for her, and I try, imperfectly, to be more like the woman I never got to thank.